You stand up from your chair, and there it is. A dull ache low in your back, right where your spine curves down into your hips. You press a hand against it without even thinking about it. You decide you must have slept badly, or sat too long, or that this is simply what getting older feels like. But here's the strange part. Your back has been aching in almost exactly that spot for more than 1,000,000 years. Right now, around 619 million people are living with low back pain. It is the single leading cause of disability on the entire planet. Not heart disease, not cancer, back pain. And by 2050, researchers at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation expect that number to climb to 843 million. Close to 1 in 10 humans alive. So it would be easy to call this a modern disease. A disease of office chairs, soft mattresses, and phones held a little too low. Some of that is true. But the real story begins long before any of those things existed. It begins on the day your ancestors stood up. For most of the history of life, the backbone was a horizontal beam. Think of a dog, a wolf, a horse. Their spine runs flat between four legs, like a suspension bridge slung between two pairs of pillars. The weight of the body hangs evenly underneath it. It is a calm, sensible piece of engineering. Then, somewhere between 4 and 7 million years ago, your ancestors did something almost no large animal had done before. They rose onto two legs and stayed there. This is called bipedalism, which simply means walking upright on 2 feet. It freed the hands. It let early humans carry food, make tools, and see predators across tall grass. It was one of the great turning points of our story. But it came with a hidden cost. When you stand a horizontal bridge on its end, every joint that used to share the load now has to stack. Your skull presses down on your neck. Your neck presses down on your chest. And all of it, eventually, presses down onto the small handful of bones in your lower back. Those bones, called the lumbar vertebrae, were never designed to be the foundation of a tower. They became one anyway. To cope, your spine did something clever. It bent. Look at a human back from the side, and it is not straight at all. It forms a gentle S. The lower back curves inward, a shape called lordosis, which pulls your upper body back over your hips so you do not topple forward. It is an elegant fix. But every curve is also a weak point, a place where force gathers and concentrates. And one group of people pay for that curve more than any other. A pregnant woman carries a growing weight out in front of her, tugging her constantly off balance. In 2007, the researchers Catherine Whitcomb, Liza Shapiro, and Daniel Lieberman showed that women evolved a subtly different lower spine than men. Extra reinforcement built into those curving vertebrae, specifically to survive the load of pregnancy without tipping over or tearing the back apart. Evolution, in other words, has been quietly patching the human spine for a very long time. Because it has always been living close to its limits. Bruce Latimer, a scientist who has spent his career studying fossil spines, describes the human back as a structure under quiet, constant strain. It was not built from scratch for standing. It was retooled bone by bone from a design meant for walking on all fours. And evolution does not start over, it tinkers. It bends what already exists into a new shape and hopes it holds. Here's where it gets personal. Because not every spine was retooled to the same degree. In 2015, an anthropologist named Kimberly Plomb and her colleagues compared the lower backbones of 3 groups: healthy modern humans, humans who had suffered a slipped disc, and chimpanzees. A slipped disc, or disc herniation, is when the soft cushion between 2 vertebrae bulges out and presses on a nerve. It is one of the most common causes of serious back pain. What they found was quietly astonishing. The people who suffered disc problems had vertebrae shaped more like a chimpanzee's than like other humans. Their spines carried, in other words, a more ancestral shape. A shape closer to the 4-legged past. They called it the ancestral shape hypothesis, and the idea is haunting in its simplicity. Some of us are walking around with a slightly older spine than others, and that spine is slightly less suited to standing up. So if our backs have been straining for over 1,000,000 years, did your ancestors actually feel it? Did a hunter 40,000 years ago ever wake and press a hand to the small of their back? The fossils say yes. In a cave in France called La Chapelle aux Saints, the skeleton of a Neanderthal man was discovered in 1908. When the scientist Marcelin Boule reconstructed him a few years later, he drew a hunched, stooping brute. Knees bent, head thrust forward, half ape. For decades, that single drawing shaped how the entire world pictured Neanderthals. slow, slouching, beastly. But Bull had made a mistake. The man from La Chapelle was not stooped because Neanderthals were primitive. He was stooped because he was old, and his spine was riddled with severe arthritis. His joints had worn down, his vertebrae had degenerated, and his back had curved under years of pain. He had lost most of his teeth, and here is the part that stays with you. Someone fed him. Someone kept him alive long enough for his bones to record all that suffering. His people carried him. And La Chapelle is not alone. When archaeologists examine ancient skeletons, they keep finding the same quiet signatures of spinal stress. Small dents pressed into the vertebrae, called femorals nodes, where a disc has pushed up into the bone itself. They turn up in foragers and farmers, in the medieval dead and the deep ancient past. Backs have been breaking down, quietly, for as long as there have been backs to break. Your ancestors did not live in a painless paradise. They strained their backs lifting carcasses and children. They herniated discs, cracked vertebrae, and ground their joints to powder, over decades of hard living. The comforting idea that everyone in the past stood tall and ache-free until farming ruined us is mostly a fantasy. So let us reconstruct a single day from that world. You wake on the ground on a thin layer of hide and dry grass. You rise without a chair to push against, rolling up from a deep squat that your knees and hips perform 100 times a day. You walk for hours across uneven ground, a child on your hip, a digging stick in your hand. You bend, you carry, you climb. You crouch low beside a fire. Your back works almost without rest, but notice what it never does. It never folds into the same right angle and stays there for 8 hours straight. And that is the twist. For a long time, the easy conclusion was that the human spine is simply a bad design. A glitch, proof that evolution handed us a broken back. But that is not quite right. The spine is not bad engineering. It is a brilliant compromise. It was built for an animal that needed to walk all day, carry weight, throw, climb, and forage across an enormous range. Daniel Lieberman, the Harvard evolutionary biologist, has a name for the trouble this causes. He calls so many of our modern aches mismatch diseases. Problems that appear when a body shaped for one world is dropped into a completely different one. Your spine was shaped for motion. Endless, varied, low-level motion. And then, in the blink of an evolutionary eye, you sat down. You sat in a chair for school, then a chair for work, then a couch for the evening. You took a structure designed to bend and twist and carry across open country, and you froze it into a single posture for most of your waking life. The muscles meant to brace your spine all day long went quiet. The discs meant to be squeezed and refilled by movement began to dry and stiffen in the stillness. Do you see what that means? The pain in your lower back is not a sign that your body failed you. It is a sign that your body is still expecting a world that no longer exists. That is why standing up hurts. That is why a long walk so often loosens the ache instead of deepening it. Your back is not asking you to rest more. After a million years of motion, it is asking you to move. So the next time you stand up from your chair and feel that familiar ache low in your spine, you might understand it differently. It is not a flaw. It is not weakness. It is a message, written into your bones over a million years, from a body that was built to move, quietly reminding you that it still is.